What happened to men pursuing girls? It feels so backwards. I just wonder when it shifted, because I feel like that is the whole downfall of why it's so hard to meet someone now, because men just don't care anymore.
In this video, we're going to be reviewing a TikTok video of a woman who asked the question, why aren't men pursuing anymore? So as I started reviewing this video and trying to unpack and answer her question, I found myself coming up with answers that started with, men don't pursue anymore because. However, I realized this is trying to answer a question with a false premise, because I don't believe that that's true, that men aren't pursuing anymore. Rather, I believe some men aren't pursuing some women anymore. And that's the question I'm going to be answering when reviewing this video and by applying scripture.
What happened to men pursuing girls? When was the pivotal moment that a man chose to not go after a girl anymore or put in any effort? It seems like guys can just put the bare minimum and not even really put in effort anymore. They don't really care to. Or they're like, why don't girls just go and make the first move and make the effort? When did it become a thing? Now it's like role reversal, where they expect girls to be making the first moves, yearning for a guy and chasing him.
Okay, I think she basically answered her own question there. She said, when did it happen where there's a role reversal? So point one is men don't pursue women who want sameness in the relationship roles. So many men these days feel like they've been placed in a lose-lose situation. And what I mean by that is, on one hand, they feel pressure from society to treat women as the same way they treat men. However, when they do that, then there are some women who say things like this woman saying in this TikTok video, why don't men pursue anymore? Many guys don't pursue anymore because they've been taught that there's no difference between men and women. And if that statement is true, why should they be the ones who pursue? On the other hand, there are guys who do know there's a difference between men and women, and they want to be the masculine man. And so they do things that express that masculinity, and they treat women differently. They open the door for the woman and hold it so she can walk in first. If all the seats are taken and a woman's standing, they get up and offer her their seat. They know that, yeah, they should ask her out on the date, and if they ask her out on the first date, they should be expected to pay for that first date. However, while these guys know that it's right for them to pursue, they're also getting pushback from society and saying that they're being sexist and that this is not the way it should be. So the point is that a lot of guys have stopped pursuing a lot of women because they feel like the women want it both ways. And honestly, it just doesn't work like that. You can't expect a man to constantly be switching back and forth between modern values and traditional values and have an inconsistent paradigm. He's either going to be living in the modern mindset that all men and women are the same, or he's going to have traditional values. You can't pick and choose. And to be clear, this is men's fault. As men, we shouldn't give in to cultural pressures. It doesn't matter if a bunch of worldly women are pressuring us to forsake our values. We should never have done that. We need to lead even when the women don't want to follow. So we can't blame women for the way we are, but we also can't keep letting women twist us up and confuse our identities. All that to say, if you want the type of man who will pursue, you want a man who has traditional values. And if you want that type of guy, you have to realize that that type of guy wants a woman with traditional values. So big picture, to answer this woman's question in this first clip, it goes on, and we'll talk more and have more answers here, but she's saying, why don't men pursue anymore? Well, a good answer to that is that the men who will pursue don't see the women who have the type of values that they would want in a woman. So whether you're a man or woman watching this, reject what culture tells you and obey what scripture says. Colossians 3:18-19. Wives, submit to your husbands, as is fitting in the Lord. Husbands, love your wives, and do not be harsh with them.
That is, I feel like, the downfall of why it's so hard to meet someone, because men don't put in effort anymore, don't care to put in effort. And a relationship won't work unless the guy likes the girl just a tiny little bit more. He has to like her just the tiniest bit more for it to work in the long haul.
I really disagree with that last statement. I think that mindset of you needing a man who likes you a little bit more is a mindset that will actually push men away and keep them from pursuing you. So point 2, men don't pursue women who refuse to be inviting of his pursuit. Now, I do think a man should be more proactive and initiating more in the relationship. So maybe that's what she's trying to say. Try to give her a little benefit of the doubt. Maybe she's saying the relationships just won't work if a guy doesn't put in just a little bit more effort in the initiation. That's not how she worded it though. So she said he needs to like her more than she likes him. And no human wants that. A guy does not want to be with a woman that he senses this feeling that he likes her more. In fact, for a man to keep pursuing a woman, eventually he needs to feel that she is equally inviting him to keep pursuing her. If he doesn't sense that she's equally interested, and I'm not saying she's doing the same things as him, she doesn't need to be expressing her interest in the same way, but she needs to be expressing her interest in an equal level, to an equal level. Not same, but equal. And she does that through not initiating, but through responding. If she doesn't respond with equal excitement and energy that he's putting in, he will assume one of two things. Either 1, she doesn't like him, or 2, she's entitled, and this is just too much drama. Either way, he's gonna back off. So to accomplish a biblical romance, what you really need to do is apply biblical truth that applies in all situations, but then apply it specifically to the romantic context. And one verse that would help here is Philippians 2 verse 4. Let each of you look not only to his own interest, but also to the interest of others. So this verse is for all Christians. However, again, when we're trying to apply it to the romantic context, a relationship's going to work when both the man and woman are trying to think about the other person's needs. Not where the man's thinking about the woman's needs, and the woman's thinking, yeah, he should think a little bit more about my needs than I do about his needs. If she has that kind of mindset, she's not going to get pursued. She's going to be projecting an energy that men are going to back off from.
So it would make sense if a guy really wanted to get to know you, that he would go leaps and bounds to get to know you. And when did that shift? Because back in my mom's era, if a guy wanted to take you out on a date, he had to go up to you, he had to get your number, he had to go through lengths to try to talk to you, even if you weren't interested at first. How my parents met? They met at a bar, and my dad asked for my mom to dance, and my mom was like, get out of here. She wanted nothing to do with him. If he had just left and listened to her, they would have never gotten married. They would have never had kids. But he was persistent. He wanted to take her out on a date so badly. He was like, what do I have to do to take you out on a date? She was working late their first date. So he went to her work, picked her up, prepped a dinner, took her to a park, just planned the whole thing. He wrote her poetry. He was yearning. How my aunt and my uncle met. My aunt was a dancer on a cruise ship, and he was the photographer. And he was persistent. She overheard him one night saying to his buddy, he was like, I'm gonna marry that girl. He had just met her. And now they're married and they have 2 kids together.
Point 3, men often don't pursue women who have romanticized ideas. Now, I agree that in some instances, a woman will say no to test a man or because she doesn't like him yet. And his persistent pursuit can often change her feelings. Now, I also know that there are many women watching this who will hear what I just said and say, no, when a woman says no, it means no. So again, I think that there's just a lot of mixed signals a guy is getting nowadays. Additionally, I believe that while I think the general things she's saying about her mom and dad and her aunt and uncle are true, I'm not saying she's lying about that, also bet I can pretty much assure that there are more details to those stories than she's giving. Because one way or the other, all human romantic relationships that end in marriage always involve a man and a woman who both are interested in each other at some level. And so it's not realistic to think that a woman can reject a guy harshly or not talk to him at all and then him still pursue. What probably happened in these instances that she's talking about is that, yes, the women rejected the men up front, but they did it in a way where they let the guy know you should keep trying. And that's a subtle thing for a woman to be able to do, but the simplest way is to keep talking to the guy. Even though you're saying no to his specific request, you're being open and inviting. So perhaps a woman just feels like, I don't want to go on a date with this guy. I just met him. It's too much too soon. But you're having great chemistry. And if you keep the chemistry going, if you keep talking to the guy, if you are smiling and you ask him follow-up questions, then he might be like, I think she's just a little shy, or I think she just needs to get to know me a little bit more. And if he's a bold guy, he'll just keep going for it like these men did in this story. But don't think that you can just be cold-shouldered, silent, distant, and think that it's a man's job to keep pursuing you. Because that's when he ends up looking like a creep. That's when women start accusing him of being weird. And then there's going to be one random woman who was like, oh, I was totally quiet, but I still wanted him to pursue me. You can't expect a guy to be able to do that. Big picture, relationships that actually end in marriage and work and form long-term relationships make sense logically. Somehow, some way, the guy expressed interest and the woman expressed interest. There was not a hard no and then the man just overcame that. Song of Solomon 1 verse 2, let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. The man must pursue the woman, but for the dance to work, she needs to be wanting to dance with him.
I don't hear anything like that now. Now we're praising eye contact. Now we're praising if a guy held a door open to us and smiled. That is what we're praising. It feels so backwards. I just wonder when it shifted, because I feel like that is the whole downfall of why it's so hard to meet someone now, because men just don't care anymore.
So point 4, men don't pursue women who have negative views of men. I think her last statement is kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. She said, I think the reason relationships are so hard is because men just don't pursue anymore. And she's basically saying the main issue is with the men. And when you overgeneralize an entire group of people like men or women, you're almost always wrong. You know, yeah, there are some exceptions. There are some stereotypes that have a glint of truth in them. We can make generalizations about how men and women are different. There are definitely patterns that are true. But when you're talking about specific behaviors and you're saying all men don't pursue anymore, that's going to skew your lens. And what's inside of you is what ends up getting projected out of you. And so when you have that idea, men don't pursue anymore, you end up sending out this vibe that the man's the problem. So yeah, are there men who don't pursue anymore? Of course. Are there men who just don't care anymore about women? Yes, there is a movement out there doing that. But you have to be able to leave your negative experiences with certain men with those certain men. Because when you start projecting, all you're doing is ruining your possibilities with the good men, limited good men who are out there. So what you believe about men always somehow gets expressed. You might not think it does. You might think you're hiding it, but you're not. If you have some sort of negative view about men, men will feel it. They won't always be able to articulate it, but they will sense some sort of negativity coming from you. And likewise, if you have a love and a excitement about meeting a right guy, and you think, yeah, there are traditional godly men out there who want to pursue women, and then when you meet that guy, that excitement, that appreciation and adoration will also come out of you in ways that you don't even realize, and he will pick up on. Now, do you know how to invite a man to pursue you? Because that's kind of the big thing I'm encouraging here. Yes, there are men who have problems. Yes, there are men who aren't pursuing anymore. But just putting it all on men is not a good idea. A lot of times women aren't getting pursued because they have not known how to be inviting. They don't know how to spark his pursuit. So if you want to know more about that, I have a whole video on 5 ways a woman can invite a man's pursuit, where I talk about this from a biblical perspective. I'm Mark from ApplyGodsWord.com. Until next time, God bless.